So for those of you looking for a longer video, this one's going to be on the shorter side compared to the 27 one that was the first one. I didn't realize how much time that was. But for those of you who watched the whole thing, thanks. So, episode 2 of High Guardian Spice Disorientation Day. And for any of you who think I am not actually responsibly drinking alcohol... Okay, that one's actually empty. Here's what's left of my water. Here's the alcohol. Like I said, I normally don't do this, but I am following the rules, and this time actually was impressive. The only time I actually had to drink a lot was at the end because there were so many acts of violence, which would violate the rules of the MA, and also because there were so many freaking animation errors. In the span of 3 minutes, when these triad witches are telling the actual Guardian Oath, which makes no sense whatsoever when you actually look at the details of it, that they would keep hopping around and someone would be like, I'm talking like this, now I'm talking like this, now I'm talking like this, now I'm talking like this. It's ridiculous. It honestly is. So, this episode is all about the actual orientation day, or as they call it, disorientation day, of High Guardian Academy. And the plot, I'm not going to go into the details of the first one because it's basically the girls going through their first day of classes. And I have issues with some of the stuff, but there's actually a really good one. I'm saving that to the end because once again it shows that Parsley is the best character in the show, and that literally she's probably the better one. Go Dwarf. So we start off, Rosemary and Sage and everybody, they're all told by this triad who specifically say, your job for today is to go through all your classes, and by dinner time, tell into this giant well your guardian vows. Now, Sage mentions that she doesn't know there were guardian vows, but Rosemary in the last episode, if any of you watched, like I mentioned, mentions that her mother, in case you guys were curious, 11 shots in this one, so, yeah, and 6 of them were in the last 4 minutes. Drink responsibly, y'all, and don't have crappy animation in the last act of your show. My first shot wasn't until 4 minutes and 10 seconds, where Lily, Rosemary, and Sage stare longingly into each other's eyes before they go off to their separate classes, because they didn't think they were in classes, but I'll cover that in a second. So, they're told specifically in the beginning that they have to recite their own guardian vows, which will be wrong, into this giant well, and what they represent is supposed to be the components of what makes up a guardian. And they say there's no wrong answer, though there is. It's parts of the whole. Which, there's a thought process behind that I kind of like, if you would bear with me on that. But for right now, let's go through the classes. So we start off with, oh yeah, I guess I should describe Tyne. She's African-American, large female with red hair, who's a fairy elf, which, we'll get to this in a second, but apparently the girls are split up by their classes based on what they want. So it's not like a traditional school where you need this many credits. It seems like each of the guardians has a certain role they wish to fulfill, and they follow that track. Parsley and Rosemary are warriors, so they have the warrior track. Though it looks like Parsley specializes in blacksmithing, so she'll be taking that class, while Rosemary does something else. Or maybe Rosemary does take blacksmithing, we never know. It never shows up in the show, spoiler alert. Meanwhile, Sage is on the magic path because she's a wizard and actually uses magic. Now, I call this lazy writing, but if this was for a kid's show, it would make sense. Show the dichotomy in the split, and it actually gets the girls apart for a reasonable reason. Which is where a lot of the show comes in with the 2-act structure, Rosemary's story and Sage's story. And they usually kind of twist in and out throughout the entirety of it. And there's always some resolution for both of them. And we'll also introduce 2 more characters, but let's start with the first class. Oh, and Tyne, because she is a fairy elf, totally not profiling, is in both classes, which makes no sense, even though we never see her in one of Rosemary or Parsley's classes, so whatever. But yes, beyond all that, so we start with the ethics class and we meet this fantasy-esque succubus demon. Let's call her what she is. I mean, at least she's wearing proper professor clothing. And she has this ethics class, and she literally has an example where there are these two cute creatures, and one of them has nothing, and one of them turns into a monster with weapons and size and armor. So she mentions that a guardian's job is to look at a situation and analyze the situation. So Rosemary says, well, why don't they both have weapons? And of course everyone starts laughing. I'm like, no, that's a legitimate answer for somebody who looks at fairness, justice, and equality to balance the sides out. Because the professor mentions that the fear of the unknown and the possibility is what gives rise to actual aggression, which kind of agree, kind of disagree. The show's not good at writing ethics, and you'll see why in a second. But it's kind of cookie cutter basic, like they took it straight from an ethics, his ethics book. So when Rosemary says they should both have weapons, they become hostile and agile, and they attack each other. But that's when the professor goes, both should have weapons, or neither. And then they become the cute cuddly creatures and they hug each other. No, that's not how nature works at all. And that's not how society works at all. There's the whole thing called the Cold War, in case you forgot, which basically kept things in balance from nuclear arms because we both knew we had them. It was stability. You could call it in the sense of not aggressive. You could call it in the sense that there was stagnation, but there wasn't open conflict on the grand scale. Proxy wars, to be sure. But the fact is that with that stuff, knowing that each other had the capability to do horrible things to each other, we kind of were in a neutral state. Now, the show would put into your mindset that no weapons is the best. If no one has weapons, no one will be mad, no one will be scared, and we would all live in perfect harmony and sing Kumbaya. Bull crud. In case you guys forgot, this is rated MA for mature, for adults. Anybody who's taken Ethics 101 would know this. That is a very basic and very low-level understanding of that. The concept of lack of protection and lack of attack actually puts people in the sense of fear. Hey, I've taught self-defense classes, and specifically in women's self-defense classes, and I noticed something that a lot of people don't notice. When people have fear, when people believe they cannot protect themselves, they are recluse, they are subdued, they are recessive. And guess what? That is not peace, that is not equality, that is concise, and basically you're just going, please don't hurt me, I won't fight you, please don't. It's not a good thing. So when you take away everything and give people, take away their ability to defend themselves, it puts them on a defensive state, which is very bad. And here's the problem, because we'll later find out what a guardian's vow kinda is. Kinda. Still don't, but I'm gonna roll with what they said, and I had to listen to it 4 times, but she says literally that we shouldn't judge something by the weapons. So hear me out here. A man breaks into somebody's house and is trying to rob it. Someone comes out with a knife to defend themselves. And then a guardian shows up and sees an unarmed person with somebody with a knife aimed at them, even though the unarmed person is a robber. Is the guardian supposed to ignore the knife and deal with that person before the robber? That's what they basically said. And also in this, we meet the beginning of Snapdragon, who is a gingerhead person. Kind of like my hair a little bit if you make it red and you shave all this off and you make him have freckles like a ginger. So, and basically he, messes with Rosemary, but apparently she paints him as a bad guy. And I'll get to him when we get to the Val section, but Snapdragon is the reason why I said that this show could have been great if 2 things change. And I am saving a massive rant for episode, I think it's 10, I want to say. But when that scene shows up with Caraway, it might be 11 now that I think about it, we're going to have some fun. Because I'm going to let a massive bubble out that I've been holding in for a while. And Caraway's coming up here because we get to the second class, which is Sage and Tyne going through old magic, and we get this idea that there's old magic and new magic, and we meet Professor Caraway, the self-insert character of Ray Rodriguez, who is the main creator, because he might be tied to the character very well, and he's even voiced by Ray Rodriguez, so this is literally a self-insert character of the highest caliber. Now, I will say, a self-insert character at its core is not necessarily a bad thing. Some people like to inject themselves into their writing. It happens all the time. So, I'm not against him doing this. What I am against, on the other hand, is how he's portrayed in this. And this will come more into episode 3, because he's got a whole segment with Rosemary. But he's introduced, and the creator does not know how to act. His dialogue is so studied. Sage. Is that Sage I see? You're from Pebble, right? Oh, I like Pebble. One of my best friends is... His dialogue is like he's speaking it naturally, but there's no inflection on certain words. There's no dialect direction. And even worse than all that, he's got no inflection with it. And we'll see later on in episode 12, when he gets to his actual fight scene of stuff that happens, that he can emote a little bit in terms of rage. It gets his voice a little deeper. But Caraway is Ray Rodriguez in this show. And it kind of makes things that happen in episode, like I said, 10, 9, 10, 11, whichever one that happens with Snapdragon, really bad in my opinion. And it seems very bad. And you'll see why later, but... So they have this little lesson, and he teaches Sage the idea that she should speak up more. Tyne sees a black cat in the window, which is set up dressing for later on. We go to... No, I'm holding her off for the side. I gotta end with something good, because I'm tired of ending with bad here. Parsley has a class. Stuff happens. She's great. I'm going to talk about it later. But then we cut to them having individual class time where the animation errors go abound because we got characters teleporting from one to the other. I got a character who's wearing a skirt, and then she's wearing pants, and then a skirt, and then pants. Pants, pants, skirt, skirt, pants. Maybe they're twins. I don't know. These are background characters with the exact same facial structure, hair color, hairstyle, glasses, and even facial lines. So clearly this is the same character trace. Either somebody did it with pants or somebody did it with a skirt. Either way, horrible design, horrible scene composition, and horrible editing. Which leads to a good class though, I will say this. So Rosemary and Parsley, because they're both in the warrior class, meet this one guy who's like the master of battle tacticians and hand-to-hand combat, and the first thing he teaches them is tree posing. Sorry, martial artist of 26 years. Yes, learning to set a base underneath you is important for all weapons, so I don't know why you're having them practice a tree pose on one leg. Maybe to teach them how to single weight, I guess, possibly, but that even wouldn't tie into this. So, Rosemary trips, falls over, and then later they have to catch a dragon, which everybody can catch their dragon, but Rosemary, which I question. And Snapdragon's there again. He's like, I mean, he's kind of like I would be if I was in a situation where we're never going to leave this until everybody catches their dragon. We're going to be here till we die. He was just letting off some steam. But because it was an insult to a male, or making him look bad, as I would say, but, you know, which I really shouldn't do because, like I said, he's a special case, but I had no alcohol up until that point besides the random jump cuts we had in the freeform time. So that happens. Rosemary, we never see her catch the dragon, so I guess she eventually does off screen. Sage goes to a potions class with Rita Repulsa from the original Power Rangers. It's so nice to hear that voice actress again. I recognize it. And what does she do? She poisons the entire class and goes, you have 1 hour to make a potion to cure everybody. I only did one shot for that one, because I'm not going to do a shot for every single student that was going to die, but like I said, I know they'll do these drinking things, but the more I do it, it makes these bad shows a lot easier. And Sage whips up a potion, cures everybody. We meet this woman, or this girl named Amarith, who has long purple hair like Raven from Teen Titans and is very short, kind of like her. Actually, I would say she's a little taller than Parsley. So, she's kind of like the uppity crust. She's all the new magic, and I actually didn't notice this. She has a lot of Van bracelets on her, which are Terra spheres, which hold new magic, and I'll get to that more later on. But, so there's a lot with that character, and Sage asks her to say thank you for saving her life, because I guess this poison would have killed everybody. I guess. So Rita Repulsa basically just laughs and just watches this. She doesn't even step in to help. And at the end, when Sage makes the cure, she says the next class is for everybody to make the potion. Here's the problem. And I'm going to get to this with the teachers in a second here. They all meet up and they talk about the guardian oaths and whatnot. They all say it into the... No, episode 3 yet. They all say it into the well, and they all absorb it and everything. And before I get into the vows, because that's going to be a whole quick thing in of itself, I want to talk about the teachers. The teachers are horrible. The ethics professor, worst idea of ethics ever. The centaur professor literally just says, "You will not use old magic. You will only lose new magic. If you're an old magic person, you suck." She doesn't say that, but she might as well. It's very hard, and we never see the centaur professor again. I mean, we see her from time to time, but she doesn't really do much. The combat teacher, very egotistical, which I guess he was a former guardian, maybe, so that makes sense. But as a martial artist and someone who studied a lot of other martial arts, weapons, and fighting structure, he does not have a good idea on how to do this, so I'm just going to throw that out there. You might not be good at your job, buddy, but that's from a biased perspective, someone who has actually studied this stuff. And Caraway, we don't get much of him. And like I said, it's a self-insert character, which at his core is not bad. I'll get to him more in the next episode when he's got a bigger role. And then we get Parsley. So she has a class all on her own called Blacksmithing with this satyr guy. I forget his name. And every time they say it, I always forget. It sounds like Ozpin, something. So Parsley shows up, and it's blacksmithing. So, of course, she's from a blacksmith family. She's very skilled at it. She shows up late, I'm guessing because she didn't know where it was. And given the size of this place, and I'm surprised how a lot of people get to classes, but yet the girls are the one, like Parsley, Rosemary, and Sage are the only ones having trouble, which I question, but whatever. Especially considering Rosemary's mom was a guardian. Maybe she took her there at one point. I don't know. So Parsley shows up and puts everybody to shame. She creates not just one masterclass dagger, basically, but two. Perfectly made. Everyone else's is garbage, basically, including purple hair, currently wearing a skirt girl who later will wear pants, skirt, pants. The animation error again. But Parsley shows up and shows that she is well above the beginner class, which, by the way, that first episode where they say they're going to be gone for a year is now retconned to the point where literally it's 3 years, or 4 years, or 9 years, depending on how much you suck, apparently, according to one of the triad, the witches who run the place. She's at least had some fun with it, so I appreciate her. But, so Parsley shows up, the professor sees her work, and after class is dismissed, he asks her to stay back. Now, full background, I was a teacher for a couple of years, and you recognize very quickly who knows the material and who doesn't. Now, as a teacher, your job is to teach the subject and make sure people understand the material that's presented in front of them. But another thing is to identify who's far beyond this and push them to the next level. And I like both Parsley and the professor here for their respective views. So Parsley, when she makes the new daggers, like she just makes them flat up, even after being late. She makes 2 perfect ones. She doesn't gloat. She doesn't rub it in people's faces. She doesn't boast. When he says good job and, these are really fine craftswork, she smiles. Like a cat, I might say, but she does smile. And she doesn't boast or brag or anything. So it's clear that she loves the praise, but it's subdued. She's not going to boast about it or anything. And the professor acknowledges this, and there's a scene where he says, "You don't belong here," and she starts to tear up a little bit because she does want to stay there and be out of the family business and out of the house and everything and away from the brothers and all that. And he quickly notices that she's distraught and corrects himself, says, no, what I mean is you should be in the third year class, and I'm going to make sure you're in the third year class. That is what a teacher should do. Identify someone's weaknesses, but also identify their strengths and build on that. And he does an amazing job of that. Of all the teachers, he's the most consistent and honestly the best one in terms of actually identifying characters' weaknesses and improving upon it, or finding their strengths and expand upon it. So it's like I said, there are good things, or at least not bad things, which I would say he's almost a good representation of a teacher, which I have issue with later in this show, that really speaks to me from my former occupation. So at its whole, that's a really good scene. And then we get to a scene that sucks. I know I wanted it was something good, but I didn't want to forget to bring up Parsley and the blacksmith teacher. So we get to the end where all of the students are gathered, all 12 of them, roll with it, and they all speak their guardian vows, and it's like honor, dignity, loyalty, heart. But something is actually very good in this scene, which brings up someone later. Snapdragon mentions his guardian vow is fortitude, and Rosemary's is loyalty. So it shows what they embody and what they feel. And there's other ones later that kind of give a little bit of people and characteristics, especially with apparently Parnell seeing Ghost, I guess. But Rosemary's is all about loyalty, and Snapdragon is about fortitude. Rosemary's loyalties will feel tested. They won't actually be tested, but she'll feel like they're tested because she'll feel isolation and separation. Snapdragon's fortitude is massive to his character and massive to the payoff. And looking back on where things go with him, this could have been a really good setup for a massive story arc to come if done correctly. They don't do it, but potential. And then the Crones show up and give the longest Guardian oath in history, which they say, you have the parts, but they mention none of the parts that any of the students say. So, basically from there's like a guardian takes their vow from the wind, the trees, and the stone. We stand strong in our conviction to honor those that came before. It's empty platitudes with no conviction. It's, we feel this way. We want this way. You continue this way. You honor the past, but push towards the future, but nothing. The closest we get to any form that a guardian does is that the ethics professor, who's a succubus demon, roll with it, literally is like, sorry, during your free time, you could go on quest, battle dragons, solve disputes, adventure to new lands, stuff like this. None of the vows even remotely touch upon this. It's all about unity and strength and connection and tradition and moving stuff along, honoring the past and pushing towards the future. Which, in a way, kind of flies in the face of a lot of the vows that the other students have made. So, you have potential here, but once again, you squander it. And the oath, people can still cite to this day the Night's Watch oath from Game of Thrones, because it builds. It has the same pace. It has the same build-up. Night gathers and now my watch begins. I shall take no lands and father no child. I shall win no crown, no win no glory. I am the sword in the darkness, the watcher on the wall. I am the shield that guards the realms of man. I pledge my life to the Night's Watch for this night and all the nights to come. ... It's long, but you get the feeling and you get the purpose. It doesn't matter where you were. It doesn't matter where you come. You stand at the first line of defense and the first shield to defend it. You are the sword to plunge into the darkness that charges your realm. This is none of that. And I know it's kind of cheating using the Night's Watch because honestly it's one of the best examples of an actual oath. But still, if you're in a credo, if you're in an organization that I'm guessing at this point is supposed to protect the world and defend the good and destroy the evil, You do a horrible job of explaining that in your oath, which once again, if that's the same oaths that Rosemary's mother Lavender took, how would she not know that? If they were supposed to be this loyal to this oath and this cut to it, if there's no other interpretation of it, why does she not know it? Did Lavender just not tell it to her? But she said her oaths were important, but she never said them? What they should have done was take everybody's oath, everybody's interpretation, everybody's thought process, and combine it into one. So that way that the Guardians stand united, that all their individual ideas combine to one unified one, that they stand united against evil, oppression, whatever. There's a lot that can be done here. But they chose the lazy route. They chose the easy route. They made empty platitudes, and these characters know nothing. And the only good thing at the end is, once again, Rosemary and Sage are having doubts about themselves. Tyne isn't helping because she's dry and just doesn't care that much. Parsley shows up and says that, hey guys, these might be our vows, but we don't have to be guardians today. We can build to it to be guardians whenever. And that's a good mentality. And once again, why I say there are good characters in this. Parsley is literally one of the best versions of it because she can see all the stress and all the fatigue and be the rock that everybody builds off of, which is kind of important for later on, and that's one of the reasons why I say this show actually does have merit. And it could have been something great if Miss Kate Leth kept her freaking hands off of it. I'm going to blame her for everything as a fair warning. But whether it's fair or not, because guess what? She did this one too. We're 2 for 2 on hashtag kill all men, but yeah, all jokes aside, I thought it was going to be shorter, but I didn't realize how much I actually cared about Parsley with the actual one good teacher and the actual oath and how they could have fixed it. But all jokes aside, guys, it's still worse than the first just because of all of the contrivance and all of the bad writing. I even mentioned some of the bad dialogue in this and some of the just stupid interactions that make no sense and all the background characters that keep hopping from place to place. I saw the same person in 3 classes at the same time, I should point out. But that's what these are for. So, gonna do one more before the end of this because, it wasn't that bad. Got some time. Gonna grab me another thing of water because the next one, and this is something I need to get off my chest about Professor Carraway, because Professor Carraway is quite easily the character I hate the most in this show, and you're gonna see why in a second, and, well, actually, no, you'll see later on. But you'll know a little bit why in episode 3, and also you'll get a bit more Snapdragon and Amethyst and how their characters act. But regardless, I will see you all next time, where hopefully I will be less than 11 shots in, plus the 15 for 26 on this. But, I think spilling the milk had a good idea. When you do this drinking game, it makes the show a lot more bearable. But anyway, guys, remember, responsibly. I don't want to hear anything about it. Make sure you're drinking water between every shot if you were drinking alcohol. Honestly, try this with soda and see if you don't burp the entire time. Make it a little fun for the people who can't drink legally. So, beyond all that, guys, I'll see you all next time when I review episode 3, Transformations. You can guess where this is going. Later.